Hi. Alright, hello guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're brand new here, my name is Nikki and this is my book nook, and today we're gonna be doing my July reading wrap up, but I just have to pause for a second and thank you so much for 25,000 subscribers. I simply don't understand. That's not a number that is ever going to compute in my head. Guys, when I tell you, I have been making YouTube videos since I was 16. I am now 26, so that is a decade that I've been doing this, which that alone blows my mind, sends me down a spiral. But this channel, Nikki's Book Nook, is something that I started so randomly, and when I tell you I had no intentions behind it, I was just kind of like everyone else back in the pandemic. I was just so bored. Like, I have always loved reading. I've always been an avid reader, and I was just at this point where there was nothing else to do but read, and I was reading so many books and I had absolutely no one to talk to these books about. So I just one day was like, you know what, I'm just gonna start making videos simply talking about the books I'm reading. I'm just gonna upload them. I honestly was doing it as a form of like therapy, I would even say, just like giving myself a reason to talk. It made me feel less alone. It allowed me to get all these thoughts out that were in my head. As you guys might be able to tell, like, I am such a rambler and I just desperately needed to talk to people about these books. And I had no knowledge at the time of book social media, booktube, bookstagram. I don't even think book talk was quite a thing, like at least to the extent that it is now. At that point, like, I had no idea what I was doing, and I had no idea when I uploaded that first video that I would continue to upload, you know, a video a week for the next 3 years, that I would gain this following and this community, that I would publish 2 of my own books over the course of that time and just meet so many amazing people from all over the world, connect with them. Some of my best friends have come from this channel and me doing it, and I just want you to know I'm so thankful for it. I'm so appreciative. I don't take this for granted. You guys seriously are my favorite people in the world. You just always, like, you somehow know, like, when I'm having my down moments, my dark days, there's always one of you to leave me a kind comment, a nice message, whether it's about books or Harry Styles, hockey, Taylor Swift, Twilight, Vampire Diaries, just anything that you guys have learned over the years that I love. It makes me so happy. And it just means the world to me, and I just wanted to say thank you. And I guess now that we've hit 25,000, I guess we just simply can't stop. Like, we just gotta keep going. So I guess that's what we're gonna do. Just so crazy. Thank you guys so much. I love you. But yeah, like I said, we are doing my July reading wrap up, talking about all of the books that I read in the month of July. I'm not gonna lie, this past month was a little weird. If you guys have been very present over the last few months, you might realize that I've been in like a weird, or kind of like in and out of a weird reading slump, where I just like haven't really been in the mood for romance, and then it's like I've been on thriller kicks, but then I get kind of tired of those and I try to switch over to something else. Like, I've just been kind of like in a weird funk of like figuring out what I've been wanting to read, which, you know, it happens to all of us when you're reading as many books as I am, as you guys are. You go through these phases. But I'm happy to say the month started out a little weird, but it ended very, very good, and I'm like in a place now where I'm just so excited to read so many more books. But yes, for the month of July, I read 8 books, kind of like half romance-y and then half like thriller, horror, mystery kind of moments. So I'll talk about them in the 2 sort of categories, but yeah, we got a lot to talk about. Let's just get into it. So first up, when it comes to the romance books I read this month, I actually read The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. I don't think I've talked about this on my channel, but I never read The Summer I Turned Pretty growing up. I think it was just like a little bit after my time, after my youth. My sister is 5 years younger than me, and she definitely read it, but I don't remember any of my friends around me talking about it. Like, I knew of it, but it just wasn't something that I ever read, is my point. So whenever the show was coming out, the first season, I definitely like saw everyone being super excited about it. I was like, should I read it? Should I not? But what the general like sort of consensus that I had heard from people was that if you didn't read it as, you know, a teenager, it was not gonna hit as hard. It was just a very like YA story. The main character, you know, was kind of annoying. Like that's just what I had been hearing. So I was kind of like, you know, I'm just gonna watch the show, see how I feel about it. And let's just say, if you follow me on Instagram, you're aware, I think to this day, like I post at least one Conrad Fisher like thirst trap edit once a week. That show became the hyperfixation of the century for me. I don't know the last time I was so obsessed with a show besides like Vampire Diaries. I watched it like 6 times through. Obsessed. So I was like, I guess I'll just keep watching the show. I don't think I'll read the books. I'm going on such a rampage, like ramble here. You don't need to know all this, but I'm just letting you know. I did not intend to read the books, but I was just in this like summery mood and I just wanted something like The Summer I Turned Pretty, but I couldn't like think of anything else to read. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna read The Summer I Turned Pretty, because I also found out that Lola Tung, who plays Belly in the show, the main character, she actually narrates the audiobooks now. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna listen to the audiobook of the first book, because obviously I've seen the show, I've seen the first season, I know what happens there, and then I will wait until after the second season to read the second book, yada yada. Long story short, I read The Summer I Turned Pretty, and I'm happy to report that I actually liked it. I thought it was very good. I feel like kind of the reviews that I've been hearing from people that read it as an adult were just very harsh, and you know, it wasn't like the greatest thing I've ever read. I definitely would agree that it is geared more towards teenagers, a young audience. Like it's about a girl that is, you know, 14, 15, 16. You're kind of seeing her like grow up. So it is for that age group, but I don't agree with the people that have been saying that, you know, the main character is annoying in it. I feel like she's just a teenage girl, like navigating life, trying to figure out who she is and what she wants and what it means to be in love. I honestly just felt like I related to Belly kind of a lot in the story. So overall, I'm just here to report, if you've been thinking about reading The Summer I Turned Pretty, it's definitely good. I definitely, you know, recommend it, especially the audiobook. Lola Tung does an amazing job of narrating it, and if you've seen the show, you know her voice. Like it's really fun to, you know, hear the book being read by the Belly that you know. So for those of you that don't know what it's pretty much about this girl that grew up spending her summers in Maine at this beach house. Her mom's best friend had these 2 sons that were about her age, so they would spend every summer together, and she was always best friends with the younger boy, but the older boy has been just like the love of her life since she was a little kid. And now they're kind of getting into that phase where, you know, they're teenagers and they're starting to have thoughts and feelings, and you know, Belly, her name is Isabel, Belly for short, is, you know, she's always been a little younger than the older brother that she's obsessed with, but now she's kind of maturing and becoming pretty, if you want to put it that way. And so this summer is just kind of the summer that everything changes. That's really what you're seeing here. So definitely cute, definitely fun. I'm glad that I read it. So next, in the romance category, like I've said a million times, I've been in a little bit of a weird slump recently. So I just randomly decided to pick this book up, because if there is any author that can get you out of a slump, that can, you know, give you a book that just sucks you right in, keeps you interested, it's short, it's sweet, you read it in one sitting or one day, whatever it might be, it's Colleen Hoover. So I ended up deciding to very randomly pick up Confess, because it's been sitting on my bookshelf for 2, if not 3 years, and I had no idea what it was about. I decided to just go into it blind, see how I felt about it, and I was very pleasantly surprised, because you guys might remember, I read reminders of him, you know, back when it came out, I think January of last year? Was that last year? I don't know. But people love that book, and I understand why. It's very well written, but for me personally, that book brought me so much anxiety. I felt like I was white knuckling the pages the entire time. Like I just couldn't enjoy it. So I didn't like it. I didn't really vibe with it, but I was interested to find out that this book actually has a lot of really similar themes to Reminders of Him. So if you know, felt like I did, where you didn't really like it, but you kind of are interested in, you know, maybe trying something similar, or if you loved it and you want another book that reminds you of it, I would definitely recommend checking this one out. I don't want to say too much about it because it's kind of hard to talk about without spoiling it, but basically follows this woman that has just moved to Dallas, Texas, which is really fun because that is where I live. That's always just like fun to see in books, but you can just tell she's struggling, she's going through it. She works as a hairstylist and she really needs to make some extra money. So she's walking through downtown and she comes across this art gallery that has a sign on the door that you know, they need help. They need to hire someone to help out there. So she decides to walk in, check it out, and she ends up meeting the man that owns the art gallery, that is the artist. And the story is dual point of view, so you end up seeing this interaction also through the artist's eyes, and you know that she does not know who he is, but he knows who she is. He has seen her before, and yeah, he's kind of holding a secret about that, and she is holding some secrets as well. So you kind of see that start to get revealed throughout the story, and they also kind of have this like instant sort of chemistry and connection between the two of them. It turns into a very messy sort of situation, like Colleen Hoover is so good at doing. She's good at creating these scenarios that are just so tough that you're like, how are you supposed to get out of this? Like, what, you know, she puts you in the main character's shoes and just like makes you really think and stresses you out a little bit. But honestly, by the end, I really liked this book. I thought it was really good. I read it in one sitting. I couldn't stop. So yeah, I definitely really liked it. I think I might start putting some Colleen Hoover books back in my rotation because it's been a very long time, and honestly, I kind of missed her. So next, I kind of had a little bit of a disappointing read. I read An Optimist Guide to Heartbreak by Jennifer Hartman. This is the first book in the Heart Song duet. You guys might remember I read Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman earlier this year, and I loved it. Literally, I have not stopped thinking about it. I made like an entire 30-minute video rambling on about how much I loved it. So I was very excited to read more books by her. I actually picked up both of these books at an author event, bought them directly from Jennifer Hartman because, you know, I didn't really know anything about her books, and she kind of was giving me a rundown of all of her stories. And this one really intrigued me because it is a best friend's brother situation, a kind of like childhood friends to strangers to lovers sort of thing, second chance romance. All of those things are very interesting to me. They're all things that I love. So I was like, okay, say less, sold. Also, these covers are gorgeous. So I knew, or I thought that I was really gonna like it, but I don't know why, for the life of me, I could not get into this book. When I tell you, I literally spent the entire month reading this book, and you can tell it's not that long. I don't even think it's not even 300 pages. And it took me like a full 3 weeks to trudge through it. It just felt very slow to me, honestly. Like, there were so many times that I wanted to DNF it, but I wanted to push through because, like I said, I loved the other book I read by Jennifer Hartman. And also, there was an aspect of this story, basically like a short little synopsis of it. It follows this girl that grew up in this small town living next door to this family that had a son and a daughter. She became best friends with the daughter, and the son was her older brother. She was always very enamored with him, just always had a crush on him from a very young age, and she would spend so much time over at that house, like hanging out with them. They really grew up together. But now, present day, she's an adult. You know that at some point she moved away from this town. Something happened to the best friend, the sister. Something happened to her, but it's very vague. You don't know what it is. But now she is moving back to this town, and she's actually moving into the house that the brother and the sister lived in. And she's deciding to go and apply for a job at the mechanic shop that the brother now owns. And he's very grumpy. Right away, he's like, what are you doing here? Whatever. Long story short, ends up like giving her the job, but he kind of gives the condition that like, we're not talking about my sister. So it's very much like suspenseful because you don't know what happened. You don't know what happened to the sister. You also don't know what happened to, like, you know, them as a friend group, what made them go their separate ways, why they haven't talked in so long. So because of that, I was just like really wanting to know what happened, and that's why I kept pushing through it. But literally, the book ended and you still don't really know what happened with that. There's a second book in the story, so I don't know. I didn't really love it. Also, this was a book about full-blown adults that I just felt like some of the interactions were like a little bit immature. The main character to me was just kind of like a little bit quirky. I don't know how to explain it. I just like didn't connect with it. You know how when there's like a book that you just like want to read, you want to love, but you just, it feels like every chapter is taking you like an hour to read, and then you just like want to put the book down after every chapter. That was this book for me. So I don't know, I'm really sad. If any of you guys have read this, I would love to know if I like absolutely have to read the next book, because at this point, I'm not that invested, which I'm really sad to say, but Yeah, if you're gonna read a Jennifer Hartman book, I would recommend Still Beating over this one. But yeah. And lastly, for romance, I finally did it. I finally took the plunge and decided to read Daisy Hates The Great Undoing. The Magnolia Parks series, universe, whatever you want to call it, is my favorite book series of all time. It means the world to me, and this is probably not something that anyone's gonna understand, but when I am like so in love with a book world, I like get stressed out to be caught up on it, to finish it. The series is not done. There's supposed to be 7 books in the series. This is the 4th one, but I have had this book sitting on my shelf since it came out back in December because like I've been afraid to read it. Like I've loved knowing that it's sitting there for me for a rainy day. Like I can't explain it, it's weird, but I finally was like, you know what? I have to read this book. Like now is the time. I've just been thinking about this world so much recently, honestly wanting to like start over from the beginning of the series. And I'm like, this is silly. You need to just read it. Also, one of my best friends, Morgan, has been reading it recently and it's just been giving me so much FOMO, like her being back in that world and voice noting me about it. I'm like, oh my God, okay, fine. I have to read Daisy Hates. I have to do it. So I did it. I actually vlogged the entire thing. So that will be coming out in a week or so. So you'll see that. But yeah, quite the experience. I literally rambled so much in that video. I could seriously talk about this series for like 8 hours straight if you would let me, because that's just how obsessed with it I am. For those of you that are unaware of the Magnolia Parks universe, I always like to explain it like it is Gossip Girl kind of set in London. It's this big friend group. They all kind of grew up together going to this very fancy boarding school. All of their parents are like socialites, celebrities, whatever it might be. They're very rich, very privileged, so much drama. It's all over the place. There's so many like interweaving storylines, but it's just the greatest thing to ever exist. I feel like it is truly a masterpiece. Like Jessa Hastings is just like my greatest hero. I wish I could sit down and like have dinner with her and just pick her brain for hours on end because I would be able to do it. But yeah, a million stars, all the stars in the galaxy. I love this series so much. Okay, now getting into the thrillers, mystery, horror sort of section of my reading wrap up. First, I read 2 more thrillers by Frieda McFadden. You guys might remember I discovered Frieda McFadden over the last month or 2. She is currently my favorite thriller author. Her books are just so good. They're all on KU. They all suck you in. They just all have like a crazy plot twist in them that just gets you like so messed up in the head. I just love her. So I'm slowly like working my way through all of her books because she has so many. But the first one that I read this month, as I go on this whole rampage about how much I love her, I read The Inmate, and I actually didn't really like this one that much. It's funny, every time I see someone talk about Frieda McFadden, I feel like, especially on TikTok, I always see this book brought up. I feel like it's a lot of people's favorites, but I just didn't really vibe with it. Pretty much, it follows this woman that her parents have recently passed away. They've left their house to her, so she's moving back to her hometown to move into this house with her son, and she is actually a nurse, so she's been looking for a new job and she hasn't been able to find one. The hospitals are not really hiring, so in a desperate attempt to just find work, she ends up finding a job opening at this high security prison in town, working as the nurse there in the infirmary. So she ends up taking it because it's the only option she has. But the kicker of it all is that her ex-boyfriend and the father of her child is actually a prisoner at this jail, and the reason that he is there is because he attempted to murder her like a decade ago. So a very interesting concept, obviously. Like that's what made me want to read it. I was like, okay, I'm very interested. But when it all sort of like played out, it just wasn't what I thought it was going to be at all, and the twist of it was just a lot. Like I love a twist that just like messes with my head, blows my mind, whatever, and I feel like Frieda McFadden is so good at that. But in this book, it was just like twist after twist after twist, to the point where it was just a lot, you know? Like I know thrillers are meant to be crazy, but it just got to a point where I was just like, this is so unrealistic and doesn't make any sense, and I just didn't really like it. Of the books I've read of hers, like this one would not be one of the first ones I would recommend. So it was fun, it was fine, but yeah, it really didn't pick up until the 70% mark. Like I specifically remember on my Kindle being at 70%, and that's when I started to get like really excited and into it. So yeah, just not my favorite. But on the other hand, after that, I read The Locked Door by Frieda McFadden, and I actually really loved this one. I thought the concept of it was just so good, and I was just so confused the entire time. I never knew what was going on or who to look at or who to blame, whatever it might be. It basically follows this girl that growing up, her father was just always very kind of like secretive and weird and mysterious. Her parents had like a very kind of interesting relationship. Her dad spent a lot of time down in their basement behind this locked door, and she just always knew never to go down there. But it turns out that her father actually was a serial killer, a very notorious serial killer that killed dozens of women over the course of her childhood, and he ended up being convicted, and he's now in prison for life. And she has gone on now to become a doctor, a surgeon, because she wants to help people in the opposite way that her father did. So she's a really interesting sort of character and narrator, because you can tell like she has a lot of thoughts and feelings about her dad, and you know, this kind of fear within her that she's going to be like him, or that, you know, she is like him. And so it kind of reminded me of like Dexter in a way, her kind of like internal monologue. It was just very interesting to read. But basically now, present day, some murders have started happening around where she lives, and it's weird because they're very specifically done in a way that is exactly like how her father used to murder people, like the kind of telling signs of what he would do. That's what's happening to these people, and they all just happen to be patients of her, like people that she has performed surgery on, or like patients that have come and seen her. They're starting to turn up dead, and turn up dead in the way that her father used to kill people. So very odd, very weird. It's kind of like a bit of a mystery of like what is going on here. You kind of, again, like never really know who to trust in this story. Really, really good, honestly. Yeah, one of my favorites of Frieda McFadden's. It was really good. And then next, funny enough, this book, again, like I've had this on my shelf for a while now, and I was like, I'm just gonna try this one out. I'm gonna pick it up and read it. And it actually ended up being really similar to The Locked Door, kind of in, you know, what it's about. But it was A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. And this follows a girl that, same sort of thing. She's from this small town in Louisiana, and growing up, she had, you know, the whole town was kind of in hysteria because these girls started to go missing, and slowly, you know, they started to turn up dead. And it turned out that her father was actually convicted of these crimes. He was sentenced to prison, and you know, it turned out that he's been a serial killer, and she never really knew who her father was. So now as an adult, she has always just wanted to know like why she didn't see these signs within her dad. So she's gone on to go to medical school, become a psychologist, and so she works with people to try to like help them. And now, many years later, some girls are showing up missing again and getting murdered again. And, you know, a lot of people feel like it reminds them a lot of what her dad did. And it's people that are very sort of close to her that in some way or another all sort of have a connection to her. So it's again, like, what is going on here? And I didn't love this one as much as The Locked Door. Honestly, if you're gonna read one of these, I would read The Locked Door for whatever reason. And this doesn't really happen to me in thrillers or mysteries. I guessed what was going on in this book really early on. Like in the first few chapters, there was just a certain thing that kind of just like caught my attention, and I was like, I'm feeling like that's suspicious, and that's what it ended up being in the end. So that's just always, it's always hard with thrillers, with mysteries, because like if you figure it out, it kind of ruins the whole story. So that very much happened to me. Like, it was very interesting. There was a lot of suspense involved. There was a lot of like wondering, you know, what is this? Who is this? What's causing all of this to happen? And so yeah, it was interesting, but it would have helped if I hadn't just read The Locked Door, because like I've said, very similar stories, but that one to me was just better. And the last book that I read in the month of July was another very random, kind of funny one. It was actually Coraline by Neil Gaiman. You guys probably know of the movie Coraline. It is one of my favorite movies of all time. It honestly feels like it is my comfort movie. I love it so much. Something about it just really, I've always loved. It just gives me like the warm and fuzzies inside. I know it's like kind of scary, kind of creepy, but I love it. It feels so whimsical, so magical. And I kind of go through these phases where every few years I start to like hyper fixate on it again. And I'm currently in that phase. I think I've watched the movie like 15 times in the last month. I've just been putting it on in the background, and I was talking to one of my friends about the movie. She also loves it, and she kind of brought up the book and asked me if I'd ever read it, and I'm like, you know, I haven't ever read it. So decided to pick it up, and I am so glad that I did. This book is so good. If you are a fan of Coraline, I 100% recommend reading the book. It's funny because it's very similar to the movie. I mean, there are so many parts that are verbatim from the book, like lines in the movie, just things that happen are exactly the way they are in the book. But there's also a lot of differences. The book is honestly, it's darker, it's creepier, it's a little more fast-paced in certain parts. YB is not in the book, which actually kind of broke my heart because I feel like he's such a good part of the movie. He's my favorite part of the movie, honestly. I love YB so much, but yeah, it's a very interesting perspective if you love that movie. I totally recommend reading the book. It's something that I feel like now that's a comfort movie for me. I think this is gonna be a comfort book. Like, I feel like I'm just going to reread this book every single fall now because it's such a quick read. It's literally, it's like 150 pages. The font is massive. You can fly through it. There's pictures in it. Sorry, that's like a very creepy one to show, but I just love this story. If you've never seen Coraline, very basic synopsis. It's about this young girl named Coraline that moves to this new town with her parents. Her parents are just very busy working all the time, don't really have time for her. She's very lonely, she's bored, and they move into this sort of like apartment complex, and she ends up finding this little door in their apartment that appears to be bricked up, like it doesn't lead to anything, but then in the middle of the night she ends up going back to the door, and it actually is kind of like a portal to this entire other world that very much mirrors her world, but everything is just different, more magical. It's like another version of her parents, and it just seems like it's heaven on earth at first. It seems like it's a place she never wants to leave, but there's definitely more to it and darker sort of things happening. There's lots of like life lessons to this. It's just so good. It's so creative. All the characters in it, everything that happens in it, I'm like, how did he come up with this? Like, it's so funny because, you know, obviously seeing the movie a million times, it's like, I know the story and it's just, I know it as that story. But then when you read it and realize that like someone came up with this and this was like an idea that came out of nothing, I'm such a dork. I just like really dork out on things like that. I'm like, how the hell did you come up with this? It's just so good. But yeah, guys, those are all the books that I read in the month of July. If you read any of these, of course, as always, I would love to hear all your thoughts down below. Also, please tell me if there's any other books that you read in July that were just amazing that you think I have to add to my TBR. I would love to know. I'm really excited for August. I feel like I'm gonna have a good reading month. I just feel like Reading Daisy Hates really got me back in the spirit. There's a bunch of books that I'm really excited about. I'm writing like crazy. I am very much into my third book right now. So yeah, not any new news on that like super soon, but soon enough. So follow me on my Instagram. If you don't, that is where you kind of are always going to get the first more daily style updates of anything in my writing world, my reading world, whatever it might be. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you again for 25,000 subscribers. I love you so much. But yes, thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you guys very soon. Bye.